Welcome to the Gals Guide podcast. Join us on an adventure to get to know famous and infamous women from around the world. Each of our presenters has a pick. Is she ancient history? Is she breaking news? Is she safe for work? Well, that's up to each presenter. All we know is that...
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Welcome back. I am Riwo, and I am joined by Katie and Debbie and Bonnie sharing our American farmer pick. So Bonnie has already talked about Ruth Stout, and Debbie has already talked about Harriet Strong. I am shortening all of these names, as you will notice. I worry that I will get all of them without tongue twisting any of it. But before we dive back in, I want to get to know something random about our gal pals. I want to know, if you were a farmer, what would your main crop or husbandry be? Dun, dun, dun.
Well, if I had my way,
yes,
I would grow what my grandfather grew on his farm accidentally.
Accidentally, I love it. Yes,
because they found oil on his farm.
Yes, grow oil, absolutely. Yes,
they drilled an oil well, and then he just sat back and counted the buckies. And
yes,
and they kept a few cows at that point, but that was pretty much all they grew was oil.
It's a very lucrative crop. Yeah, I hear.
As a lazy farmer who can grow nothing, that would work for me.
Yeah, no.
So
I dig it. Yeah.
I'm not sure what my favorite thing to grow is.
Right.
But I would definitely probably do, what do they call it, like a hobby farm?
Gotcha.
Almost like a petting zoo.
Right, yes.
And so there would be lots of puppies.
Of course.
There would be lots of goats.
Yes. The fainting kind, the right ones?
All the goats.
Okay, all right.
With their weird little eyeballs. With their square, like, pupils.
Yeah, it's from all the tin cans.
Those tiny Highland baby cows. The long-haired cows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep. Like, I told Trey a couple months ago, I was like, no joke, I want to go to a petting zoo. Like, we need to find a petting zoo.
Exactly. I'm going to need to pet some wild animals. That's what I'm saying. Some farm animals and stuff. I like it. Katie, what about you? The look on Katie's face is like, oh, God, farming.
Well, I initially thought of having a pumpkin patch because I do love fall and pumpkins are so pretty.
True.
But to make that profitable, you have to let people come to your farm, and I don't want anybody coming to my farm.
Yeah, no, that's fair. What kind of closed-off farm do you want?
So I think instead I'll just go with grapes.
The grapes, right?
Yeah, I mean, they look so pretty when they grow in the rows of them, and I'll have my own little Tuscany.
Plus, then when you get
backyard.
like angry at them, you can stomp them. You know what I mean? Make wine. I think that would be a great idea. Yeah. Well, Josh would do whatever the crops would be, and I'm not going to question it. I just want llamas or alpacas. That's all I want. I mean, I love a llama or alpaca because their self-defense is spitting, generally. And any animal that spits in self-defense is my favorite animal. Also, camels and apparently hippopotamuses. Actually, hippopotamuses are really, really mean, and they will kill you, but they also spit.
They also...
Yeah, but they'll spit.
They also can projectile pee.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
I had one. There was a kid that was messing with one at a zoo.
At a zoo? Oh,
and his dad kept telling him to stop, and the hippo turned around.
Right,
and it shot 6 feet and hit that kid. It went straight. And Dad, bless his heart.
Don't mess with a hippo.
Yeah, the dad did not go all freaked out. He said, I told you. I'm like, yes, parenting done right.
This is very true. But yes, I love llamas, and that's how I say them. Llamas! We were driving, our Tractor Supply, which we don't go to anymore, but our Tractor Supply, it used to have just randomly the llamas would show up out front. Have you ever seen the llamas out front?
What?
And we would just like hard ass stop the car and turn around because you could walk the llamas through like a little agility course. You're going like 3 steps at a time. And then at the end of the agility course, you get to have your picture taken with the llama, and it was the best day.
In the little parking lot by the fairgrounds?
Where there's now food trucks? Yes. Yeah, it used to be the llamas would show up there.
But they don't anymore.
Oh, that I didn't know
not
about.
since the pandemic.
Moved here at the wrong time.
They might come back. But I mean, they'll have to battle with the food truck.
A bunch of them at the 4-H fair here.
That's
and
right.
they used to have stuff like Kiss a Llama, or they would have llama costume contests or stuff. They always do a lot with the llama. So
I've heard of the llama
Yeah.
costume contest.
I know there's a llama farm up in Arcadia because they got out one time and My daughter had to go to work and explain that she was late to work because she was stuck in a llama traffic jam.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're kind of jerks. It's lovely. I think that's why I have such a kinship with them.
They were trying to get to you, Leah.
Exactly. They're jerks and they spit. How could they be better? I just want to hug them and squeeze them. So who I have for you has nothing to do with llamas.
Oh, okay.
But who I do have is, y'all know about Rosie the Riveter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of World War II. So the men go to war and then the women are called to work in the weapons factory is where we get Rosie the Riveter from. And you've got that image of a white woman in denim with a headscarf and a really muscular arm with usually the yes we can kind of slogan sort of things. So that's 1942 to 1943. So what if I told you 26 years before that, for World War I, women were asked not to join the factories, but asked to join the farms. So I'm going to talk about the Farmerettes, which are basically the Rosie the Riveters of the farms who took over farm work when the men were called to war for World War I. So 1917, America entered World War I, and many of the men left the family farm to either enlist or to get a better job because of the war effort. Some of them just straight up left the farm because there was better work. So that I didn't know until I did this research, and I went, well, that makes sense. But there was big money in defense, and much more money in defense than there was for working on the farm, so that's why men went. Now, the weird thing is, though, people still need to eat. So those farms are really kind of important, you know, for making sure they still keep going for Americans to have food. But the Woodrow Wilson administration, who we already have beef with for many reasons, really couldn't figure out how to keep farming going. So the women just figured it out on their own because the government couldn't be bothered. Now, they did use a model from Britain. So in Britain, in World War I, there was the formation of the Women's Land Army. Sometimes it's also called the Women's National Corps, and sometimes also called the Land Girls. There was a TV show called The Land Girls, and so these are the British versions of these farmer ladies. The women were sent to work on farms that needed workers, and they were paid to work the land. And the British government actually helped manage this, where our government couldn't even.
So women.
I know, right? Exactly, right? So seeing what the British were doing was very successful. American women from gardening clubs, YMCAs, suffrage clubs, and civic groups started establishing their own group called the Women's Land Army of America. Cool. So WLAA. It just rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? So this is also why they have the nickname the Farmerettes, because that works a little bit easier. So a large supporter of these gathering of these women's groups were actually women's universities. So we're talking about Vassar and Holyoke and Bryn Mawr and Barnard College. So we're talking about fancy, rich white ladies who are like, yeah, I want to work on a farm. These sort of things just don't kind of make sense, do they? But higher educations like Barnard College started training women to work on a farm, actually. So the dean, Virginia Gildersleeve, I love her name, Gildersleeve, and the associate professor of geology, Dr. Ida Oligieve, they just have great names. They formed the Women's Agricultural Camp in Bedford, New York. So in Bedford, New York, for 4 months, 142 women came to learn how to farm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right? So it was not exactly, well, it was like college. It wasn't free, though, all right? So because it wasn't free to learn how to work on a farm, these women are paying for it, it was a lot of the upper middle-class women who were actually doing this. It was city women that were then brought to rural America. And there's just so much. I know, isn't it weird?
So the country boys are going to the city to get new jobs.
Correct.
And the city women are going back to the country.
Yeah.
And learn how to farm.
Yeah, exactly. It was a different time.
Yeah.
But also somebody had to, so I guess why not? So the first director of the Women's Land Army of America started dubbing it the Farmerettes, and it was Harriet Stanton Blatch.
Oh.
And yes, the daughter of Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very deliberate to actually show that the organization of the Farmerettes had very close ties to the suffrage movement. So that was deliberate in that. Also, Elizabeth was she was dead 15 years before the Farmerettes started. So her daughter was much older, and so Elizabeth Cady Stanton didn't get to see the Farmerettes. I think she would have really liked it.
I'm trying to remember that quote she had. That was really awesome.
Find it. Okay. So as the Farmerettes were set up in 33 states, they employed 20,000 women, and they received no federal funding from the Wilson administration. There's many reasons to not like this dude. I'm just saying.
There's a shock.
When he goes into a coma and his wife takes over, it's great. But until then. So it was the women's organizations and private contributions that paid all of the bills for this, for people to have food. But it was also the women who made the rules. So get this. An 8-hour workday. The women were paid the same wages as the men. And the Farmerettes did have to be 18 years old and pass a physical exam and wear a uniform. Right? Huh. So you get some good and some bad, right? So the uniform. Because always when you start talking about women, and then there's the uniform, right? Yeah. So it was blue overalls. Sometimes it was khaki overalls, but usually blue, kind of like the Rosie the Riveter denim. A hat and sturdy shoes. And people were shocked that the women wore pants.
Oh man.
On a farm.
Wow. How shocking.
People actually argued over the uniform, but the uniforms, they were practical, and they were designed to create the same effect of soldiers in uniform, for everybody to be uniformity, to not worry about physicality, but also it was about to live up to the uniform, right? To be a farmerette. It was very weird but cute. It kind of reminds me of the scene in A League of Their Own, where it's the uniform aspect sort of thing. So, but it wasn't so much that the Farmerettes uniform wasn't sexualizing the ladies, though, like in A League of Their Own, but it was about how people complained about it. That why are the ladies being ladies, are the girls being girls, and so they're acting like a bunch of boys if they wear pants and work on a farm. Nobody else is doing it. This keeps being my argument to the whole thing. People gotta eat. Just let them go on the farm. But anyway, but they were very wrong about being able to use the difficult work conditions. So there's an LA Times article, and the Farmerettes were coined to turn the new earth in history of the American woman. Right? Exactly. Did you find the quote, Bonnie?
I'm looking.
Okay, all right, good, because I've got another excerpt. So this is from another book. I'm going to try to get it for the library, but it's called Fruits of Victory, the Women's Land Army During the Great War. And so they kind of describe this. It's kind of like the first day. So it says, a brass band welcomed the first unit of the California Women's Land Army when it arrived in Elsinore on the 1st of May in 1918. The whole community turned out to greet the 15 women dressed in their new stiff new uniforms. The Chamber of Commerce officials gave welcome speeches, and the Farm Bureau president thanked the Farmerettes for coming, and the mayor gave them keys to the city. Right? Cool. So the Land Army recruits drove 50 miles from the headquarters in downtown Los Angeles. The mayor dispatched a truck to chauffeur them. After the welcoming ceremonies, the mayor apologized for the lack of an official municipal key ring and offered a rake, a hose, and a shovel to the Farmerettes. Nothing like being awkward about it. I hope he didn't use the word hoe too many times. But it was emblematic of their toil for patriotic defense. So instead of being given a rifle, they were given a hoe. But the crowd gave them 3 loud cheers. So, yay.
Hip, hip, hooray.
Hip, hip, hooray for the Farmerettes. So, war was big business, and many businesses had U.S. contracts with the U.S. military to supply good and foods and services to the war effort. So California fruit growers were actually no different. They actually needed quite a bit of dried and canned fruit to actually go to the front lines to support the boys. So the Farmerettes got just the same as the men in terms of pay and working conditions, but they also agreed to some really radical protections for any workers of any gender at the time. They gave them comfortable living quarters. They gave them designated rest periods, lifting limits, and workers' compensation insurance. This didn't exist on a normals for anybody, but they were Berkeley students, this particular group. So the Berkeley students, they were sent to this California agricultural farm in Davis for training. Another group from Santa Clara, there's a Clarita and there's a Clara. They were sent from Stanford to Santa Clara. And then there was about 175 women who signed up to be sent to different farms in California in the first month of this existence. So there was also one in Vacaville, California, which is where I used to live as well. They had a camp there too. So this was a little description of the Vacaville camp. It means Cowville, by the way, if you're wondering what Vacaville means. So, I mean, it obviously was a farm at one point. So the Vacaville camp was constructed and furnished by a consortium of local fruit growers, and it was paid out of their own pockets. They built the camp on the high ground near the Vacaville train station with a 6-foot-high pine stockade surrounding it for privacy. You know, you don't want anybody gawking at the ladies now, do you? But inside the stockade, there was canvas sleeping tents with wooden floors, a screened kitchen and a dining room, showers, a dressing room, and a hospital tent. I mean, like, come on. Most farms did not have this. Yeah. It was paid for about $4,500 by the growers as an investment. And only those who were kind of had the buy-in, it was kind of like a sharecropper sort of situation, those who contributed to the camp could then get the reaping rewards of what the farmerettes actually, like, toiled and all that kind of good stuff. So the farmerettes, now assembled in San Francisco in their office, listening to their supervisor, was explaining what their life and what their work would be in the Vacaville camp, right? She warned them that the summer heat would be brutal and that picking fruit atop ladders would make their backs and their arms and their fingers sore. Really? You know, so like farming then? Mm-hmm. Like, okay, cool. But she read to them from the Women's Land Army Pledge and then asked aloud if they would be willing to arise at the sound of a bugle at 5:30 in the morning. They very much treated them like soldiers. And they shouted yes, and they asked about a military-style structure, and they shouted yes. They asked if they would muster for an inspection, for exercise drills, to take kitchen duty, and to eat their rations without complaint. And they all said yes. And then they joined in rousing cheer. Here was their cheer, Katie. Ready? Don't be a slacker, be a picker or a packer. WLA, rah, rah, rah.
Wow. I like it.
Rah, rah, rah. Don't be a slacker, be a picker or a packer.
I want to make up a routine to that. Get out my pom-poms.
Yes, exactly. Yes, rock out. So one of the gals that the book talks about is Adea Purnell. So she was 17 when she signed up. Remember when I said you need to be 18? She lied about her age. No one ever did that, right? Exactly. Actually, she didn't lie about her age. She said, I am husky, so they decided to let my youth go unnoticed and simply just make me 18. So a big lady got in because she could lift shit. She also made captain in Lodi in the Grapevines. Kindred spirit, Katie, look at that. Mm-hmm. So the LA Times actually went to Vacaville, to the Vacaville camp, and they actually talked to Ida, and they talked to the other farmettes, and they reported that this women's land army composed of able-bodied young women, selected just like men are selected by the army for their physical capacity, their good characters, and their general deportment and trained discipline, are even more strictly than the men. They are, I think it says acquitting. They are acquitting themselves with amazing efficiency. I think they're quite. Is it acquitting? Yeah. Okay, all right, gotcha. I was thinking acclimatizing, but yes. Oh. So they worked really, really great, and they were reported on very, very well. The Land Army only lasted from 1917 to 1920. It was very much a product of World War I. But who knows? If we didn't have the Farmerettes in World War I, we might have not actually had Rosie the Riveters in 1940 because they were successful and because the press liked them and because they looked cute in their little uniforms and stuff like that. And we got to eat.
Eating bonus.
Right? I highly recommend it. I really, really do. Then we have the Rosie the Riveters. So that is the Farmerettes that I have for you. Rah, 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 rah. Did you find the quote, Bon?
No, I know it's written in my bullet journal.
Are you thinking about making an art
it's
project?
something. I wrote it down because it's just it's awesome quote. I don't even remember who she was talking to. It was something about near the end of suffrage. Like her mother had already passed.
Yeah.
And she's working with like Alice Paul.
Yeah.
And them kind of in the second little wave of that.
Yep.
And she's talking to somebody, and she's just like, I've worked my whole life in suffrage, and I'll be damned to some Tom, Dick, and Harry. I don't even, like, this whole paragraph rant.
Right.
And I'm like, you get 'em.
Yes, exactly. Was it the daughter that was also in the... Dun, 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 dun.
Harriet Stanton Blanche's Elizabeth Cady Stanton's daughter. Yeah.
There you go. I thought she had lots of kids. That's why I was like...
She did. She had...
Okay, yeah.
Well, I don't know about lots, but I think she had at least, like, 4.
Gotcha, okay. There you go.
Because Susan was like, you need to quit popping out babies.
Right? Exactly.
And come travel with me.
But Elizabeth was the writer and Susan was the go-out activist. Yes, it worked very well.
Auntie Susan.
Exactly. I love it. Sweet. Should I
Wait.
wrap it up? Yes, what are you thinking?
Is that the quote?
Dun, 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 dun. Is it possibly?
Yep.
Ah!
I've worked all my life for suffrage, and I'm determined that I'll never again stand up on the street corners of a great city appealing to every Tom, Dick, and Harry for the right to self-government.
Beautiful.
I put in Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Blanche,
Yes.
quote, Tom, Dick, and Harry, and that did not pop up.
Exactly. Sometimes the Google Kung Fu is with you, and sometimes it is against you. It's unfair.
I put in, I've worked all my life for suffrage.
I tried, I said something about, like, my whole life or something.
Right.
And one of them, it wouldn't pop it up.
But we found it just in the nick of time. I would have put it in the show notes. It's all good. All right, should I wrap us up? Well, that wraps it up for this week. Join us next week for another American Farmer is Picked. That's right, Picked. As we share the Gals Guide podcast continues. Thanks for listening. Want to learn about more women of history? Gals Guide opened a unique women's history lending library. Come visit and explore our collection. Learn more at galsguide.org. Thanks for listening.